That's the thing. But like usually on like weekends, I put my phone on silent so I don't like see anything because it's the weekend. And then I just saw a few missed calls from my management, and I'm like, oh shit, what's going on here?
Right, of course. That's actually, to be honest, man, that's a nice thing to do. Turn off your phones on the weekends. I feel like very few people in our business do that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I know. I think I've learned from my management to do that because they don't respond to things on the weekend. So
yeah. Well, this is like the most beautiful backdrop. Where are you right now?
I am at home. Actually, there's more here. I just chose the best one because the best angle because the sun is shining my way. So I don't have the sort of, the weird face that you get in the morning on any given day.
Yeah. No, it's beautiful, man. It's you look
Thank
great.
you.
The birds are chirping.
Yeah, it's autumn or fall, as you call it.
Right. Yeah, it's always the switch for you guys.
Yeah, it is the other way around, isn't it?
Yeah. Which is always funny. It's why you always see all the US people go over there in our winter in January.
Yeah, 100%. It's I did enjoy doing that for a while, spending winter in LA, winter in Australia in LA. Right. I loved it. It was so good.
Yeah.
Just escaping winter, just forever chasing the sun.
Yeah, of course, man. I mean, was there ever a thought of moving over to the States for you?
There was, yeah, absolutely. I think one thing that I'll be very honest with you about is because of growing up. So I grew up in Iraq, right? And the aim was always to escape for a very big chunk of my life. And so there was this sense of being unsettled and chasing a home all the time. And even moving to Australia, it took me some time to make sure that I feel at home when I'm here. So I think there's a part of me that doesn't want to let that go in order to find another place and chase home. And like, I would have loved to. There was something about it, and it's no criticism at all, but I was even listening to a Serge Tankian podcast with Rick Rubin yesterday.
I just listened to that. Yeah, it was great. It's
so good. But there's a bit that he talks about LA it felt like it was his office always, even though he grew up there pretty much,
Right.
So maybe there was a part of LA that feels so transient to me that I could not find my feet there.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And I mean, LA is where, our industry is too, right? And so I think it's hard. I mean, it's weird. I've never lived in LA myself. I lived in San Diego for a long time. And, obviously we all have a bunch of friends who live in LA. And I think for a lot of people who do what we do, man, it's hard to have that balance. No one, I mean, they're not turning off their phone on the weekends, like.
No, exactly. I think there was a part of me that thought once I go there, that sort of, there is a level of sort of, I guess, naivete that's gone the moment you go there, because you're going to be in hustle mode, work mode. And, a lot of people have that. I do have that to an extent, but I've always enjoyed living in Adelaide in South Australia, where I get to travel and do all these crazy things and then come back home and I'm home. It helps me as a launch pad to go and make projects and work with a really clear space,
That makes total sense. And Adelaide's beautiful. I've only been in Adelaide. I played there one night, and that's the only time I've ever been. But beautiful. I still have memories of it, man. Yeah, it was great.
I didn't know. Where'd you play?
What was it called? It was, I don't know if I can remember the name. I mean, it was a club that was kind of like a dark, grimy kind of spot. There were 2 levels, but it was still pretty small.
Rocket.
That might have been it. That could be. I got to look it up. I'll send it to you later. But yeah, it was, I was just there for a day, and yeah, man, it was a really nice place. Have you been there the whole time you've been in Australia?
Yes. Yeah, pretty much. So I moved here. My dad has moved here because he found a job here. We've been here since pretty much. But I think that since the pandemic is the first time in a very long time that I've actually felt like I'm not traveling and I'm here present. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. I mean, when you did move here, well, first of all, how long ago did you move from Iraq to Australia?
15 years ago, maybe.
Yeah.
15, 16 years ago. Yeah.
So you've been here
it's
for
been
a
long
while.
time. Yeah, I have been here for a very long time. And yeah, I love it. I love Adelaide. I love the sort of, not only the laid back sort of sense, but I'm like I love to indulge myself in like life and what it offers. And so I feel like wine and produce and food is an extension of that. And I think Adelaide is very big on that we do it really, really well here. Some of the most famous wineries, probably one of the best wine regions in the world exists here in the Barossa Valley. So it's really nice being here. It feels nice.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I mean, it's interesting though, if you've been there for 15 years to say that you're only really starting to feel settled, now this pandemic year. When you first moved, were you already touring? Were you already traveling a lot?
No, not at all. I was like really young and I wasn't really doing music seriously. I've been doing music since I was a kid. Since I was in Iraq, I've been like dabbling in music and on my old computer. And even moving here, I didn't think it was going to be, I could make a living out of it. You know what I mean? So it took me a very long time before I started touring. I only started touring maybe 8 years ago.
Well, what about back in Iraq then? What kind of music were you doing, or what kind of music was even around you? I'm going to ask a bunch of ignorant questions. But
no, it's fine. Go ahead.
Yeah. Like what kinds of music were around you? Were you musical as a kid? What were you doing like very early on?
I would say very early on, my earliest memory of music is my dad playing a lot of like, I guess Peter Gabriel, a lot of Phil Collins. I've only just started realizing how awesome Phil Collins is recently.
Oh, sure.
Like I'm talking the last year, like everything he makes is a hit. So that was like up there. And then even like some UB40, there was a lot of music that he was playing. Iraq has traditionally been very big on music. In the 60s, 50s and 60s, we had like record stores and all these records from around the world would come into Iraq and people loved it. Like my parents listened to Bee Gees, to Tom Jones, to the Beatles.
Sure.
Yeah, so there was a lot of that kind of intrinsically built into Iraqi culture. It's only later on that music started getting less and less kind of coming through to Iraq. And the thing that I remember when policy and politics took its toll on music and culture, my dad told me, both my parents told me that Rivers of Babylon by Boney M was a huge hit in the 70s. And it was banned in Iraq because they mentioned Zion. And as you probably know, a lot of the Middle Eastern countries have got a very peculiar stance on Israel. Yeah. And so that was banned, but everyone was playing it in like bootleg cassettes in their homes.
Sure.
So there was this kind of need to listen to music. Later on, I started getting more into, actually my early years, I remember Pet Shop Boys as well was being a huge thing for me. Sure. And more recently I've started getting back to that. But later on I started like making music that is more instrumental, sort of like Jean-Michel Jarre, Vangelis, later on like more beatsy stuff like Fatboy Slim, Left Field, that sort of music, and moved gradually into like more ambient subboards of Canada, that kind of stuff. So
how was that music reaching you at the time? The Jean-Michel Jarre, Left Field, or any of that?
It was more, as I said, because there's this like the rebellious, because Iraq went under sanctions, right? The UN sanctions, so nothing was getting into the country.
Right.
Everything was kind of controlled by the state, and there was hardly anything that was officially getting in. But because people had this like knack of wanting to be part of the world, and they don't want to be shut out and being isolated. All these cassettes were like making their way through, all these CDs were making their way through like kind of black market sort of stuff, and everyone's copying it. Like I remember there's a record store where I used to live, and I used to go there all the time. And he used to like have bootlegs of things that he would make copies of for me. I still remember like when I was a kid, like Madonna Ray of Light is a huge inspiration for me.
Sure.
And that didn't come to Iraq until like a year or two later. So things were delayed, but things were coming.
So you were saying you were making music of your own back then, some early computer kind of stuff. What were you making it on? What kind of software were you running?
I think because we like couldn't afford the like top of the range sort of computer. I was a kid. I got like an Amiga, like a Commodore Amiga. I miss those days, man, because we had only 4 tracks or 8 if you have an Amiga 1200. And if you want to have a delay on one track, you need to copy the track, make it quieter onto the next one, and move it down. So that's 2 channels gone. You know,
it's a commitment.
It was a commitment, and you really like need to make the most of the sound that you had. But I just genuinely miss it. I miss the limitation it gave me, and I think there's merit to saying that limitation really brings out creativity, and I'll try to do it all the time. It's like limit the amount of resources that I have when I work on something.
How do you do that? Like, what do you mean specifically? Like, limit the number of tracks you have, or the number of like synths you're using, plugins, that kind of thing?
I think I limit the number of synths that I'm using. So, for example, I have like a little modular rig that's not like big, but I'll try to make things like at least the melody on this, and that's it. I'm not going to like add plugins. I'm not going to throw in plugins. I love the minimal aspect of working. Like I love having synths, but my synth collection is nothing compared to others. I love being on the road and just being with my laptop, and that's it. Yeah. You know, that's all I have.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I was literally earlier today talking to somebody about this, where it's very possible for us, especially if you stick around long enough, to know too much, you know, and to kind of become prisoners of information, so to speak.
Yes, absolutely. I think there was like a blessing in knowing less sometimes.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you ever go back and listen to stuff you made a long time ago and think, you know, how did I make this? Like, you know, it's sometimes I listen to my old stuff and it sounds like a stranger made it, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. It's, I would not even attempt to find whatever I made. They were horrible. Like I've come a long way. I paid my dues. Everyone's like, oh, like just like newfound sort of enjoyment of life and really making the most out of your career. I was like, man, I pay my dues. I've paid my dues.
Yeah.
Like I've worked really hard.
Well, it's good to be aware of that, right? I mean, that's everybody, when they see you successful, they assume that it's just happening now. You know, nobody sees the years it takes.
Oh man. Yeah. It took years, a lot of hard work. And I think the longer you spend getting there, the more you appreciate it when it happens. And yeah, I feel pretty like, you know, I've worked hard because I've had a lot of people that I looked up to in the music making world that have worked really hard in what they do. And so I wanted to make sure that I worked hard. Does
anyone come to mind thinking about those inspirations?
Oh man, again, like Jean-Michel Jarre is the biggest for me. Still is the biggest inspiration. He had like some dips in his releases in terms of like, I'm not sure about this, but recently he's released a whole album called Amazonia, which is based on it's for an art exhibition by a Brazilian photographer who I can't remember his name. And I heard it and I'm like, that is why he's still the Don. Huge inspiration for me. But I even like, there are people like, for example, going back to Ray of Light Madonna, people like William Orbit, who's produced her, he's produced Pink, he's produced a whole heap of other artists. Even like maybe 12 years ago, people like Switch was a huge inspiration for me, who went on to be part of like he produced for I think for Shaka Khan, for Beyonce.
Right.
Yeah, I loved Switch so much, and he was the first
Oh, he's
iteration
incredible.
of.
Yeah.
Yeah. He is like. There's a few artists that come along the way in every generation that completely changed the game. He was one of them. Skream even was one of them later on.
Yeah.
Slightly later on with like the dubstep movements.
Yeah.
There's a lot. There's a lot of people who have changed the game in a sense, and I think I'm really lucky that it happened in my lifetime.
Yeah, absolutely, man. No, and those are all great references. I mean, yeah, Skream. I was just talking to somebody about Skream too, and he's obviously like he's the dubstep don and changed the world with that. But then he went on to have this amazing, house and disco part of his career. And I think it's really inspirational when you see somebody sort of define a sound and then just move on. I think a lot of people, even if
have to, it's very hard to like, I am nowhere near those people. But for me, for example, when I first came up, I was associated a lot with the whole deep house movement that was happening from different parts of the world that a lot of people look into Australia from the US.
Yeah.
So I made a lot of like kind of deep house edits, like did edits for like Frank Ocean, Justin Timberlake, and then Sage the Gemini and all that stuff that pretty much defined my career. But the whole sound became so big that it felt like I was just another cog in a big machine. And I thought, I don't feel good about what I'm making anymore. And so I completely switched it, released a song called The Future, which is completely different. It is a pop song. It's a pop ballad by every measure, you know? And a lot of people were like, oh, what is this guy on about? Like, he's just making like house music. And then all of a sudden he made a pop song. And it was something that there was a conscious effort with that because I didn't want to feel too comfortable and I had to change. So what's the most shocking thing you can do is just write a song and attempt to make it as objectively good as possible.
Right.
So people don't measure your song by the songs before it. They measure it by the song itself and what it is. And it went on it just became platinum here in Australia.
Yeah, it's really successful, right? Yeah.
It's a very, very successful song. Yeah, but you needed to do that switch sometimes. Sometimes it doesn't work for a lot of people, but I think you got to, because you don't want to be, as I said, like a tiny cog in a big machine, that you're part of the very kind of genesis of this machine. You know what I mean? How
did you look at it back in those early years? I mean, because when you're in Iraq, were you even thinking about a career in music? Obviously, it was something you loved and you were doing a lot of, but what did a career look like? What did you think you were going to be doing?
Oh, man, I had no intention or sort of desire. Well, I had desire always. Like, I've always wanted to, but I had to be very realistic. I mean, the first phase of my life growing up in Iraq, it was almost impossible to make a living out of music because people didn't really look upon music as something serious.
Was there like a local scene at all of any kind?
Not at all. Unless you're into like kind of rock-ish bands. Like my dad was in a in a university band, or like sort of, I don't know what to call it, but like sort of flamenco influence sort of thing. I think it's a big thing in the Middle East. Yeah, like guitar picking with Middle Eastern music, which is very interesting. And a lot of those people actually didn't do that mainly for a living. They've always had another career behind that. And I never thought I was going to do that, especially in Iraq. And then moving to Australia, I think it was very hard for me to even fathom coming to a country full of amazing musicians. Like, it's in the very curriculum of a lot of schools here.
Right.
And to make it as an immigrant, like doing it for a living, it was almost impossible for me to fathom. In fact, it was well a year into me releasing music and things like really popping off for me that I still was like, I had to take my parents, my mom specifically, to go, oh, like you gotta focus on this music thing. Because where I come from, you have to be like a doctor or an engineer. And I did that. But got a bachelor's in computer engineering, and then I had a master's in international business.
Oh, wow.
And like, I had to like do my due diligence, I guess, before I was like, oh, I need to focus on this now, because it took my immigrant parents, who always wanted me to have a secure job, to go, this is going really well for you. You should probably focus on this. And that's when I was like, went off.
Yeah, that's so funny, man. I love that, because that's the opposite of what you would expect. That's the opposite of most of those stories, right? For your mom, especially as an immigrant, like first generation immigrant, to turn around and say, no, yeah, follow this crazy music thing.
Yeah. She's, I love the fact that they both, I think it's really funny that, especially with my parents, they live kind of vicariously through me, especially my mom. She would find things that people said about me somewhere, and she'd be like, oh, blah, 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 said something about you. Oh, there's this comment on YouTube, someone says something good about you. And like, whenever someone says something bad, I'm just used to it. I don't really care. Like, you got to have a thick skin to be in this business. But she would like go ham at them.
She'd take it really personally, yeah.
Very personally. She would find things that my management even miss. Like, she'd be like, does your management know that blah, blah, blah played you? I'm like, oh, I didn't even know. I'll send it to them. So yeah, they became my biggest fans and the biggest sort of support team for me, which is really interesting.
Yeah, well, that's amazing. Yeah, that's really amazing, man.
It's very weird, isn't it?
Yeah, cool parents. It's very cool. I mean, what did they do? You said your dad found a job, which is what brought him out there. What do your parents do?
My dad is actually, he's got a PhD in microbiology. He's a microbiologist. Used to be a vet, as in like a veterinary. Yeah. He was a lecturer back at University of Baghdad, and then when he came to Australia as an asylum seeker, the moment he got released and got his permanent residency, he started working in like a test lab. They do like, blood tests and all that kind of stuff. Oh, sure. My mum is an accountant by trade, but now she's a translator. All my family, all my extended family, my sister's doing her PhD right now in health sciences, environmental and health sciences. So my whole family is like gone in a different trajectory. But right. They've been incredibly supportive. I couldn't have done this without their blessing, 100%.
That's so cool, man. And it's kind of fun that you're the odd one out with all of that.
Yeah, it feels good because like my job took me all over the world, and the Iraqi diaspora is so far everywhere in the world. I haven't seen my aunties, for example, for like 20 years. And then my job took me to England, and I met all of them again. And they were incredibly proud. Like everyone, they play my music to all the kids, all my videos. My sister would come to shows when she came to my show in London. It's great to have a family that are like incredibly proud, but they're in a completely different world,
Yeah. And I'm sure they're proud of you, not only for the accomplishments, but for, sort of representing yourself and your family and even your own culture. Because I'm sure a lot of people want to sort of map this identity onto you. I guess what I'm trying to say is I think especially in the Western world, people have limited ideas of what a country like Iraq is actually like. And I think there's a lot of stereotypes and a lot of that sort of thing. And in your travels, is that something that is fun for you to sort of work with and dispel, or is that something that's kind of like, this shit again?
Oh, yeah, I know what you mean. It doesn't really frustrate me. I'm glad that I think my first thought usually is, I'm glad I'm in a position to explain it. And I think, for example, in my kind of 10-year anniversary of being in Australia, not many people knew that, actually. Up to 10 years, people have been listening to my music, coming to my shows, and really like being part of my journey. Didn't know that, I'm a son of an asylum seeker. Yeah. And I came to Australia at a later age, relatively. And so I posted this kind of big, post about that and my journey, who I am. And it was at a time where Australia has always had a bad history with asylum seekers, and we were used as an example of how to deter asylum seekers and refugees. It's horrible, absolutely horrible. And so I wanted to post that there and say, and have a positive spin on it in a way. It's like, look, you've been listening to my music. You don't know that I'm the son of an asylum seeker. This is what I make. You don't know any better.
Right.
So there's so many people like me out there that are doing amazing music that come from these parts of the world that are troubled, you know. Again, going back to the Serge Tankian podcast, like not many people knew he grew up at the time where the height of the civil war in Lebanon. There's so many people like us who don't really mention it too much. I try to mention it in a positive way to say asylum seekers do need help, but they can contribute so much to new cultures and societies they move to. I started working within 2 months of moving to Australia. Like, we all want to work, we want to contribute. Yeah. I identify as Iraqi because I was born there and that's my culture of birth, but also as Australian because Australia has given me so much and I feel like at home here. I identify a lot with the Australian culture in a way. Basically what I'm trying to say is you can be both, and you can be a productive member of society that adds a little bit of culture, like a little bit to the culture of the country. Oh yeah,
and we need that. I mean, you're speaking my language here, man. Obviously the US has a lot of issues with asylum seekers right now. And we're not doing a great job of it. And it's lessons like that.
Not many people are.
No, I mean, that's true too. But especially for the US, I mean, I get on a soapbox a little bit, but you know, the US, I mean, we're a nation of refugees. Like everyone was a refugee at the start here. Yeah. And to me, you know, what makes the US so cool is the mixing of all these different cultures. And the fact that we seem to be moving backwards with all of that right now is, I mean, it's beyond frustrating. It's a whole lot of shit. But I don't know, man. Hearing stories like yours and the fact that it is horrible.
I saw a video the other day from a refugee in the UK actually talking about the UK policy, anti-immigration policy in the last year since the pandemic, and drawing parallels, repelling people. It's hard to explain, but drawing parallels of repelling people, and the narrative that he's saying is like, you go, oh, they're 100% talking about people coming on planes, bringing like the coronavirus. You need to have tougher measures there at the heart of the pandemic. It turns out, no, they were talking about asylum seekers when planes are coming through Heathrow and Gatwick and all these airports around the UK up until middle of last year. And it just shows it's not only the US, there's something to be said about a lot of these sort of nationalist governments coming into power. And I think a lot of us, like they did a study on the humankind forgets every 3 generations on average. A lot of people have forgotten the horrors of World War II and Nazis, and everything is coming back now to the forward under a different guise. And people are identifying with it again. Another thing, there's this awesome German book which was made into a movie called Look Who's Back, and it was a bestseller in Germany in like 2004, 2005. And it's pretty much the premise is Hitler wakes up in 2004 Germany at the side of the bunker.
Oh wow!
And he didn't die; he just woke up, and it just shows you. It's hilarious. It's so funny, and it's just like it's like his perception. It's his perception of what's going on. It's like his internal monologue. It's really funny seeing Germany how it is now. But I think there's some merit to it. When you read it, you go, oh, he could totally come back and people would get behind him, not even knowing. It's just because his name isn't Hitler.
Right.
People would get behind him because he's saying the same things that people are spouting now.
Yeah. No, it's, man, that sounds really interesting. I gotta look for that. I mean, it makes me think about, you know, that mixing of cultures and that sort of thing. Like when you first came over to Australia and you were making music already a little bit at that time, right?
Yep.
How did you get involved with the Australian music scene? Like, was there a period of culture shock? What was affecting you? What were you listening to? Like, who are some of those early connections or some of the early ways you got music out once you did come over to Australia?
I think when I first moved to Australia, I wanted to work immediately. I just wanted to immerse myself in the culture and kind of understand what it's about. I think that was very, very important for me because I wanted to avoid a culture shock. And so I actually started working as a volunteer for Oxfam for like 4 months.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed doing that. It was a really nice way of easing me into it. And then I was like, I've missed out on so much growing up in Iraq. I missed out on making music properly, knowing music, like really immersing myself, going to shows. Like I have not been to shows since I moved to Australia, until I moved to Australia. And so I worked in a music store. I applied to work in music retail. And so I started working in a music store selling musical instruments. I worked in like the high-tech section. So sold speakers, keyboards, computer music, all that kind of stuff. So there's like a two-pronged sort of way of immersing myself. One is learning about the technical side but kind of subconsciously or unconsciously knowing about the music side and learning about that, but also learning about music culture, Australian culture through retail and dealing with different people that come into the store.
Right.
And through that, I've started developing this kind of understanding of how to make music properly with the tools that I had. And like, I could borrow a keyboard, take it home and play with it and understand what it's about and take it back. So that helped me understand music and understand culture here in Australia. And the people that I've worked for, I ended up working there for 7 years maybe. Like a year or two into my touring, I was still working retail 2 days a week. And I finished my studies as well. But those people are still like family to me to this day because they helped me so much. Yeah, it was incredible, an incredible experience. But I started making music because I started loving a lot of that sort of deep house sort of sound, I guess.
Right.
I don't know what to call it. But what Dusky were making, Justin Martin, Eats Everything, and it was actually Eats Everything that picked up my records and started playing it. And he introduced it to the Dirtybird crew. And that's how my track called Ride Roof Back, that's how it became a thing.
Right.
And Justin Martin made his own edit and started playing it. And that's how my music got. So it was the other way around, I guess. Like people knew me through Dirtybird crew, Justin Martin, all that, and then Disclosure later on. And that fed its way back into Australia.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, I think that's kind of typical sometimes is like you have to get hot somewhere else before you can get hot at home.
100%.
Yeah, which is it's always a funny thing, man. I was very much the same way that way. I mean, how did the Dirtybird crew even find your music in the first place? Was this a SoundCloud thing?
Man, SoundCloud made my career almost. I remember actually listening, probably one of the most influential pieces of music in my life was It's Everything's Essential Mix, live motion in Bristol, which I was very, very lucky to play a couple of years ago.
Oh, nice.
With Paul Kalkbrenner. That is still probably my favorite essential mix of all time. And that influenced a lot of what I made. And I made these like 2-3 tracks that I sent directly to him. I was like, look, man, I'm like a huge fan of what you make. This is what I made. I'm not sure. And he gave me some feedback and then he was like, yeah, the track is ready. Let me play it. He was almost going to put it in his following essential mix a year later, which didn't happen, unfortunately. But yeah, that's how it happened. I just sent it to him directly. Yeah,
that's cool.
He's the sweetest man. And he came to Australia maybe a year or two later and I played with him in Sydney because the promoter in Sydney was like, you are kind of synonymous with him, your name in Australia, because everyone was talking about you too. And it was so nice to meet him. Crazy man. He's mental. Crazy. His energy is nuts.
Yeah.
He's all over the place. Love him. Love him. He's such an amazing man.
Yeah. There's some great characters in what we do, man. There really are.
Oh my God, so many.
Yeah, there's too many to list. I mean, it's almost weirder when you find a normal person, I think.
Oh my God, yeah, absolutely. Who was I thinking of the other day? I can't remember, but I just thought about it. And I was like, oh, that was a weird character. Can't remember who it was.
It
I don't
could
think
be
it was
so
actually
many
a nice
people.
thing that I said about them.
Yeah.
So I probably shouldn't mention it.
Yeah,
here.
that's fine. I got some of those too. Yeah.
Let's put it part of the French crew in
Sure.
music.
Yeah, that's general enough. Yeah.
Not Charmy. Charmy's a beautiful man.
Charmy,
He's a
I
really,
love
really nice
Charmy.
guy.
Yeah.
I picked him up. I remember back in my early days, he came to Adelaide to play a show, and we were chatting, and I'm like, hey, dude, I'll pick you up from the airport. And I had like this really shitty, like 1991 Toyota. Yeah. I can't remember what it was. It was like one of those with the lights just open up.
Oh, yeah,
like
yeah.
Celica, a Toyota Celica, right?
Yep.
And I picked him up, and the dude is massive. Like, I don't know how tall he is. And he
Tall
barely
guy,
fit in my car. Shitty, rattly car. And I'm like, shit, Charm is sitting in my car.
Right.
This is really good attraction. So the other day we were talking about something, and I was like, look, dude, if you ever come to Adelaide, I've got a way better car now. So I'm going to pick you up in like my beautiful Audi. Trust me, man. I don't think he's going to come anytime soon. So that's a shame.
Well, yeah, not with the pandemic going, but I'm sure he'll be back soon enough.
Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah. So, I mean, with you, like, how did it go from those early connections, the deep house sound, the Dirtybird connections, those first couple cosigns to, then remixing, giant acts, like giant global acts like Ellie Goulding and Disclosure and, all of these, Sam Smith, and working with all these people? Like, was it kind of a gradual build, or was there a moment where it seemed like it really, like a switch flipped and it really took off?
There was I think that the turning point was being recognized not only from the Dirtybird crew, It's Everything, Justin Martin, Claude Von Stroke. It was eventually turned into the deep house movement, the kind of that sort of sound made its way to the US through not only the people that we mentioned, but I did an edit for Sage the Gemini gas pedal, and that thing became like absolutely huge. And Flume got interviewed talking about the Australian sound because that became a thing.
Right.
A lot of music was coming out of Australia. People like Taku, Wave Racer. There's a Touch Sensitive, Anna Luno. There's a whole heap of people.
Yeah, all the
that
future
were coming out of Australia.
Folks. Yeah,
all the future classic people sweated out. And he listed 10 people that he thought were influential in changing that sort of the Australian sound, and he listed my name, thankfully, as one of them, which I'm very thankful for. And that became the turning point. Is people were like, "Oh, who's this guy?" Because everyone else on that list was doing like kind of bass music, bass heavy music on the sort of trap side,
sure,
future bass sort of thing, which he was pioneering, still is pioneering. And I was the only person that did house, and people like really enjoying that sort of sound. And that's when I got to remix Ellie Goulding, and also got to chat a little bit with Disclosure guys, and I toured with them when they came to Australia. I was talking about them yesterday because we're talking about this venue in Melbourne that doesn't exist anymore, and I played back-to-back with them for 2 hours in this venue after their party. I got to meet them, and it kind of, that's when I was like, oh, we got a new song, do you want to remix it, all that kind of stuff. And yeah, it just snowballed from there. It was an incredible journey.
That's beautiful, man. What about touring to other places? What was the first time you got to leave Australia and go play somewhere else?
It was in the US, actually. My first ever show was in OC, actually, in Orange County. That was my first ever show. I landed and I played there. It was surreal. I think it was surreal because I was most definitely jet lagged. I couldn't sleep on the way there. And I got there, and my manager at the time picked me up, and I was like a zombie playing, so it didn't really register properly. And honestly, man, since then it's been just, for that period of time, it was like a big blur. I played some incredible places. Playing Halloween in Seattle was nuts. At this festival. I can't remember what it was called. Things like, what else? Like playing in San Francisco in front of the stage. It's like this old theater, and everyone's around you on the stage. I played. I think it was with Jessie Andrews actually.
Oh yeah,
we played together on that show.
Shout out to Jessie, man. I haven't seen her in years.
I haven't seen her in a very long time. She was awesome. Like
I love Jessie. Yeah,
she is incredible, and her music. It was like I make this thing for a living, and I had no idea what she was playing.
Right,
like the music she was playing, I was like, oh. Like some really cool bangers in there.
Yeah, I don't know if she DJs anymore, because she was always just a fucking great DJ.
She was incredible, yeah. And music taste is really, really nice. Actually, we're in San Francisco for that show when the Giants won the World Series. And we were there, we had dinner, and then we walked out of the restaurant. And I have never seen anything like it. Like the streets were packed with people.
Yeah.
Everyone's going nuts. And I was like, that for me is like there's those flashes of, oh, like I'm traveling doing this thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Seeing these things that I don't get to see normally.
Yeah. I mean, that's American culture right there, baby, is, championship baseball team. Nice. Yeah.
I love it. I love it. I haven't felt that in a very long time. Like being in this euphoria celebration mode when your team wins.
Yeah. How is it now, especially in this last pandemic year, because you guys were able to get back to some shows a bit earlier than some, right?
Yep. Yeah.
Has it been, I guess what I'm asking is I'm curious, like, do you feel like this year where people couldn't come to Australia, has it been good for the local scene? Have locals been able to shine a little?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm pretty lucky that I'm part of a handful of people that was able to tour in Australia. It's been good. It's been weird because they have to put all these measures in place to kind of make it a bit more COVID safe. And some of these measures, honestly, it's more about optics than it actually provides some level of functionality. Like the show that I played last weekend, it's called Grapevine, in like an hour out of Melbourne in Yarra Valley, which is like a renowned wine region. They had to split so there's maybe 4,000 or 5,000 people there. They had to split the front of the stage, like right in front of the stage, into this dance floor area, which fits maybe 1,500 people, but only 250 people were allowed.
Oh, interesting.
Just because, we don't want people to mosh. I'm like, everyone is going to mosh. Right. The moment you're in there, you're in there.
Right.
It just made it look really interesting with like gaps and stuff. So there's a lot. It's a newer way of working with things, I think. There were a lot of shows that went ahead that were seated, or they pioneered these shows in Adelaide, actually, where they have pods, like
they do that here too.
Book. Yeah. That's also interesting. I said no to a lot of seated shows. I just didn't know whether that is something that I wanted to do. It's not conducive to what I make. You know what I mean?
Yep.
But kudos to the people that did it. It's been interesting. It's been interesting seeing how people reacted. The first show back was a festival on the Gold Coast, and people were ready for it. Like I played some weird music and people like loved it. I was like, cool, this is really nice. This is a good time, Yeah.
Maybe people are a little more open. I think everyone's brain is a little reset so that, because I think if you're the kind of person who's going out to shows every weekend, going out to the club, it does sort of wire your brain to expect a certain thing and to expect music 100%. To be presented in a certain way. So maybe, I never 100%. Thought about that, about the crowds, is that maybe people would be more open to us being a little weirder.
Absolutely. And I love that. Like it was a good chance for me to reset the way I do things as well, what I play, and come into the new fold with like a new identity,
Well, talk a little bit more about that because, I know you put out that the Soulitude EP over the last year, which was kind of a different sound for you. And you've put out, club records since then as well. But do you feel like there's anything from this last year, whether it's a change in you as a producer or as a DJ or even just as a person in the world, like, is there anything from this you think you're going to carry with you? Any changes that are going to stick?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Soulitude was a snapshot in time of like this kind of collective mindset of introspection, I guess. And I wanted to tap into that a lot. I don't think I'll be making an ambient EP, at least not under Motez, for a very, very long time.
Yeah.
I'm very proud that I did that. It's one of my proudest pieces of work because the video that went into that, I'm not sure if you saw the video and how we shot it. It's like, I'm so proud of it. Like, we won so many awards, me and my team, at the SA Music Awards for like best video, best EP.
What was it? I don't think I saw the video. What was it?
Oh, you got to see it, man.
I will. After this, I'm going to look. But yeah, talk about how you did it. It's a
live stream.
Oh, okay.
So we did a live stream of me playing the entire EP with my instruments. Pretty much took my entire studio out to a cliff in South Australia, in the Florio Peninsula, overlooking the ocean around sunset. And I played the entire EP with my piano, with my Moog, with my modular. Pretty much took my studio and like planted it outside.
Yeah.
So it's like a play on a sense of being alone, but being connected to the world, which is a lot of us are. This is the first time I think, I mean, obviously I've been around for World War II or World War I, but from my perspective, this time is the first time that I know of that everyone was connected. I think is accelerated by the internet and social media.
Yeah.
And it says that everyone was connected on the same level and everyone felt the same way. Everyone is isolated, but everyone was connected. And so Soulitude was a play on that. And the way we shot the video was that. Took my entire studio out, planted it on a cliff, and I played the whole thing, and we live streamed it. And the proceeds from the live stream, people can donate, and went to charity for an organization called Support Act that looks after music crew, production crew for music festivals and music work who have lost all their income all of a sudden overnight. So
right.
I wanted to do my bit and raise as much money as possible for that. For Support Act.
That's beautiful, man. Yeah, that's great.
And it just, Soulitude was like such a weird but so nice a time in my life. I think what I got from that moving on is my housemate is designed the lighting for it. And it was just him and I just like talking about it. And we're like, are we actually going to take your entire studio and plant it on a cliff in the middle of nowhere and do it on a shoestring budget? Yeah, we are. And we did it. And that's the mentality that I'm going to move forward with, is that when you put your mind to something, you can do it.
Yeah.
If it's good, the idea itself is good, you can do it. And that's what I'm moving on from there. From a creative perspective, I can definitely attest to that. Sound wise, I think my sound has gone into a more, I guess, emotional, but like not emotional in the sense of being sort of kind of low energy, but emotional in the sense of being rebellious and out there and turning a page, you know.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, just a little rowdier, maybe.
Yes, exactly. Rowdy is a very good word. That when I was trying to explain it to my management, like, it's not aggressive. I don't know how to explain it. Rowdy is a very good way.
Yeah,
I'm gonna tell them.
There we go. Yeah, perfect. We got there. I mean, what is coming up for you, man? I mean, what are you excited about? What's like the most fun part of what you're doing right now?
Just really, it's like I'm really feeling myself musically a lot. Like I'm thoroughly, like, back in, throughout this whole process up until this point, it's like good, but like you make something, you go, oh yeah, maybe, I'm not sure. Oh yeah, but whatever. But now I feel like I can use all my powers now. I'm really good. Like I'm really good, but like I'm good at knowing what I want, and I'm good at knowing how I'm going to make it sound that way. I'm good at executing my ideas.
Yeah.
You know, the ideas that I had in my head, I feel like I'm a lot better equipped to do it now. I feel like all these years, it's like a combination to get to this point. And I'm very excited about the next phase. I mean, Give Me Space that we just released the other day is a first kind of page of a big chapter, and there's more coming out. It's part of a bigger picture. I think another thing from Soulitude EP that is going to carry on from there. There is no singular song without being part of a bigger, like one facet, part of a bigger picture.
Yeah.
And the same with Give Me Space. So there's a bigger body of work coming out soon.
That's great, man. I think when we're able to sort of pull back and see the greater, like where all the individual pieces we make really fit in, I think those are special moments, because I don't know, maybe there are some geniuses who can sort of plan that out. But for me, sometimes it's just you have to be in the right mental space at the right time to be able to see it. And then once you see it, it makes all your decisions so much easier, you know?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think I'm really into future-proofing the sound that I'm making.
Future-proofing.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, well, talk about it, because I love that term, but I think, what do you mean by it?
I think having a foresight into where you want to go, an end game of where you want to go, and building things from there back. It's good to be in a situation. One of the best things about the pandemic is that I had a year to take stock and build for a year on.
Yeah.
And so I was in a position to go, all right, I know this is getting released now, but I know like a year and a half down the track what the sound is going to be like and where it's going to lead to. So that's what I mean by future proofing. It's like, you know where it's going to go. A lot less reactive than it used to be.
Yeah, I think that's a really big key too, right? Is it's so easy when you're just trying to get on, trying to make it work, to be reactive and just, you know, if you don't get results with something, to see something someone else is doing, be like, oh, maybe I should try that, you know. And it's so easy to just work yourself up into really losing your way that way.
Absolutely. I think it's hard. I always try not to. I actively try not to compare myself to other people and what they do. I'm doing my own thing. And I'll try to make it as different as possible. I mean, objectively, the music has to be good, but I don't want to be pigeonholed into something that everyone else is doing.
How are you with that? And, you know, something like social media, where, you know, all of our peers are throwing up what they're doing all the time. Is that something that you have any kind of relationship with?
It took me a long time to kind of understand what it's about. It proves very hard to compare yourself. It's very hard not to compare yourself to other people when you have this platform there with metrics.
Right.
I had like a fuck it moment. I'm just making music. I'm just going to make music. I'm going to make music that I'm going to send it to my team. And if they like it, I like it. That's all that matters.
Yeah.
And we'll just release it out to the world. Do your due diligence. Kind of showcase pieces that are part of the bigger story.
Right.
And that's it. Leave it out to the world. And I think it helps more, going back to the point of I'm doing my own thing. It helps a lot when you're doing your own thing. You can't compare your sound to other people.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, yeah, if you're doing your own thing, ideally your sound wouldn't be comparable to other people anyway, right? Like that should be the goal.
100%. That's exactly it.
Yeah. I love that, man. Well, this has been great. You know, is there anything we haven't talked about yet? Anything else that's on your mind? Anything else you want to get out there before we wrap it up?
No, I think it's been good, man. I've been a lot more honest than usual. So
well, hey, I
not that I'm not honest. Not that I'm not honest, but like, as I said, I was really looking forward to this one because I've seen like the episode with Hayden James, for example. It's I was really looking forward to this one. So I think I was just like, said a lot more than I had planned, which is really good.
No, yeah, that's great, man. I loved it. And yeah, thank you for taking the time to do it, man. We can definitely do it again sometime.
Yeah, that would be great.
Absolutely. Before we get out of here, though, I am going to ask you one more question, which is kind of the question I ask at the end of each one of these. Just looking for a time in your life, like a moment or a memory, and it could be from any time when you're a kid, whenever, when in a single moment, in a single instant, music really affected you deeply, really meant something to you in that moment. And it doesn't have to be an important moment. It can be a random thing, kind of whatever pops into your head.
My dad playing Peter Gabriel's Sledgehammer for the first time as a kid, listening to that going, oh, what is that? And then I seeing the video, I was like, oh, this is a big thing. It's just beyond the music itself. I think that was a very important moment. I'll still remember it.
I mean, it's interesting talking about, when you first see a music video, you can like a song, but then especially as a kid who just hasn't seen that much of anything yet, to see a wild music video for a piece of music you already love. That's gotta rewire something in your brain.
Especially Sledgehammer. Like, I think, and I could be wrong, it's the most awarded video in the MTV Music Awards of all time. I think it's the most awarded music video.
Wow, ever. I did not know that.
It's like way ahead of its time.
Wow.
Yeah, check it out. It was like, bear in mind, it was like 1987 or something, or 88 when it was released. Right. And the video was like way ahead of its time.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. Well, and that's impressive too, especially back then when, they were showing wall-to-wall videos. For it to stand out then. Yeah. That's a little harder than, what it is now, where there's only a few crazy videos a year.
Yeah, you're right. Like, I'm not sure if music videos are a thing anymore, to be very honest. But we did our bit. We wanted to add to with Give Me Space, the video that we did with Amaric, who's this incredible video graphic designer, 3D animator. We wanted to use the video as a vehicle to add more depth to the story of the song. And that's why it was important to do the video in that way. It's just, it adds another level of storytelling to the song. Yeah,
no, absolutely, man. And I, don't get me wrong. I think there's still a lot of great music videos being made, but I think sort of on that, big, massive level, it's like what Cardi B and Beyonce and maybe a couple other people are going to drop a crazy video once or twice a year. And then, otherwise it's on us. It's like what you're doing, you and a friend on a shoestring budget, maybe it leaves room for other people to innovate. But yeah, man, there's something to that visual aspect.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it goes back to working with the least amount of resources that you have, making something very creative. Yeah. Always works.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting to hear you say that too, because that's, when you were talking earlier about like the bootleg cassettes back in Iraq and, how back in the day you were on the Amiga working with the limited resources there. Like, I wonder, do you feel like that influenced, your musical worldview in a certain way? Like, is there still a part of that kid that is you?
Yes, definitely. Not only music, but just living life in general, because it was hard growing up where we grew up with limited resources and like essential services were at times non-existent. It was a very hard life, but we learned to make the most of it with the little things that we had. I think it's just maximizing what you have, a form of opportunity cost in a way. Yeah. And I think that stuck with me with music making, with life. And I would not change it. I would not change it. I love doing it this way, because it really makes me appreciate the little things and the things that we take for granted.
Well, that's beautiful, man. Yeah, I don't think we got to say any more than that. I think that's a great way to wrap it up.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you, appreciate man. Great to talk to you.
Likewise. Thank you. I'll speak to you soon.
All right, man. Take care. Bye. Peace. All All right, that's the show. Shout out to Motez. Thank you for coming on, man. That was great chatting with you. For everybody out there, I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. Don't forget, Motez, Give Me Space. The song is out right now, the first single off of his upcoming EP. You also got to go grab the Soulitude EP he put out earlier this year. Go watch the videos for all of it. I love how he does full package shit for everything he's doing. The concept is there. The vision is there. Go check out Motez. There's a link in the description of this episode where you can go and do just that. Also in that description, of course, you're going to find another link to come join the Back-to-Back Discord. Guys, join the Discord now. There's already some good reasons to do it, and soon there's going to be a lot more. That's a little hint for anybody who made it all the way to the end. But yeah, big things coming. So join the Discord. You can keep up with me at Willy Joy, at BackToBackPod on all social media, or backtobackpod@gmail.com is the email address. I hope everybody out there is doing well. I hope you're having a good week. It's crazy that we're staring down the barrel of summer already. And I got to be honest, I'm feeling good about it. Go get your vaccines safely. Get back into the world. We can do this together. I'm feeling positive, so I want to send some positivity out to all of you. Whatever you're working on this week, whatever you're thinking about, whatever you're hoping on, whatever you hope comes through, I'm hoping for that too. Whatever you're working on, whatever goals you're thinking about right now, just start doing it. That's really all it is. It can be a little thing. Just make a little start, and you'll be amazed how much better it will feel and the doors it can open once you just start doing it. So that's my final thought for today. I'm thinking about all of you guys out there. I love y'all. Take care of yourself, take care of the people around you, and I will talk to you next Tuesday. For Back to Back, this is Willy Joy. Peace.